Welcome, gearheads, to Speed City's coverage of the Miami Grand Prix. This is Jon Massengale, and I'm on the ground in Miami. And I've got Jonathan Green and Bob Varsha back at the studio. Jonathan, how am I sounding, buddy?
Sounded pretty good, man. Yeah, I'm down at turn 5, going to go for a swim. No, just kidding. No, great. I mean, you got to love qualifying sessions like that. That's, you can't complain about the weather. You can't complain. It's pure, and that's why it's thousandths of a second. I mean, it's incredible when you see that comparison between Verstappen on the squiggly bits and the top end speed of the Mercedes engine of McLaren and Mercedes, just a little bit faster in a straight line. But that's where Max is making the time is 3, 4, 5, and 6, and he did it to aplomb today. That was brilliant.
Bob Varsha, what do you think?
I agree with everything Johnny just said. It was spectacular to watch. Putting aside this morning's sprint race on the wet and a drying track, which was just about as chaotic as I've seen in a very long time, with crashes and time penalties and on and on and on. It was just remarkable stuff. But qualifying was more of the same on a perfectly dry track. And the fact that the top 3 were so close together, 17 thousandths of a second or whatever, even the slightest problem for anybody else, and you heard other guys complaining about this, that, and the other thing, that's going to do you in, which makes Max's performance even more amazing because he had that bobble at turn 1 on his final fast lap that clinched pole. It's just incredible to watch. His 43rd career pole on the week in which he became a dad, and the list goes on and on and on. It's Max's world, and we're just living in it.
Well, guys, I have a very special guest because we are broadcasting from the Pirelli Hospitality down on the field, and I've got Mario Isola, the head of Pirelli Motorsport. He's a regular on the show. Mario, how are you?
I'm fine. I just saw a spectacular qualifying, so it's been a very good weekend. The sprint was good. Qualifying was very close as usual. During this year, I have to say that we had many races with cars that were in 1/10 of a second, so that's fantastic.
I know. Right before we came on the air, Mario and I were talking. It's just amazing how tight these times are. It's just crazy.
Yeah, that's why teams are stressing me to understand better the tires and try to find a final tenth of a second or 100th of a second that could be pole position or not.
Yeah, you said the teams were asking you, what do I have to do to get any more out of it? You go, you're all within 100th of a second. You obviously all are getting all out of it.
It's impossible to give them any suggestion because we are not talking about a working window of a tire. Now they're just looking for the peak of grip and they want to stay with all the 4 tires on the peak of grip. Sometimes it's difficult to balance. For example, the front and rear axle, that is the key for the performance. We saw some mistakes at the end of the main straight with understeer because they overheated the tire. And clearly it's not easy for the driver, but that's the beauty of this championship.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, hey, Jonathan and Bob, jump in if you got any questions for Mario, because I know you guys are chomping at it.
Mario, can you just explain, you changed the tires from last year's Miami to you changed, tell me what you've changed, and therefore will that, do you think, change the strategy for tomorrow in terms of the softer and the medium?
Yeah, we decided to go softer on a number of races to try to encourage the teams to move to a 2-stop strategy. Usually a 2-stop, a race where we have a 2-stop strategy is better in terms of action with also the risk to make some mistakes and to create a bit more action on track. So we moved one step softer in Jeddah, here in Miami, Imola in a couple of weeks' time. So where we have margin to go softer. And we have also a new product from the beginning of the season with compounds that are better in terms of mechanical resistance. So less graining means we can go softer, but unfortunately, teams are so good in managing tires now that despite our push to go softer, they still manage to have one-stop races.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll jump in, and I'll start by saying, Mario, congratulations to Pirelli. Producing some terrific tires that have given us great racing without tire problems. And that's, you can't ask for more than that. I like the moves you've made to try to make the competition more interesting. We're looking at 2 mandatory pit stops at Monaco in a month's time to accomplish the same thing, give more strategic options. What other races going forward are you looking at that you might change the compounds?
If we talk about Monaco, we are going one step softer in Monaco, but this is not really changing the situation because cars are so big for a narrow circuit like Monaco that is almost impossible to overtake. So the only solution that we discussed and found was to impose 2 mandatory pit stops, as you said. Then we are going softer also in Montreal. And it's interesting that we decided to homologate what we call C6 compound, that is the softest in our range. Last year we had a range of 5 compounds. We realized that for some races we were not soft enough, and we decided to develop and homologate a new C6 compound. This compound is going to be used for the first time in Imola in a couple of weeks. We need to better understand how it works to define where we can use it. Obviously, we already defined this compound for Monaco and for Montreal, so it will be quite interesting to see how it works. And for the rest of the season, there is the possibility to see this compound also in Singapore and maybe in Las Vegas, because in Vegas, we know that the circuit is low energy and very low temperature during the night in winter. So that could be also an option for Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
would it help you in Vegas to be earlier?
From the horses. Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, I just wondered, we've moved it earlier in Vegas. Will that help your preparation for that, Mario?
Earlier in the year, you mean?
No, earlier in the evening.
In the evening. Looking at the temperature from previous races, I believe it could be helpful, but not changing really the situation. We are talking about a few degrees, and first year it was quite okay because we were not far from 10 degrees or so. Last year was a bit colder. Clearly, in Vegas in November, you can have also a temperature that is close to 0 degrees. Sorry, I use Celsius, you use Fahrenheit. So
I understand you.
Sorry for that.
if people are listening to Formula One, they're kind of used to trying to do the conversion in their head. So Well, we are getting it from the horse's mouth. We're listening to the voice of Mario Isola, the head of Pirelli Motorsport, and the tires are probably one of the most important components of Formula One. So we're really excited to have you, Mario. But we got to talk a little bit about the racing that's happened today. The qualifying that Antonelli had in the sprint was amazing. I know he didn't, get the results, but he's looking impressive. He looked again impressive here in qualifying here.
Yeah, I was impressed in Melbourne, first race on Sunday, very difficult condition with rain, and then the circuit was drying. And Kimi was able to score points in such a difficult situation where the other rookies were basically out of the race. So it was a first moment in which we know that he is a talent. We know that he is very fast. His career is telling us that he is very fast. But jumping into a Mercedes Formula One car and being able to be so close to George, and George is racing for Mercedes since many years. So it's really incredible. Yesterday he did a masterpiece in the sprint qualifying. So I was so happy and proud to give him the trophy.
Yeah, I saw you. Yeah,
and clearly being Italian, finally we have an Italian driver able to be at the top, and I believe it's quite important.
And again today, out qualifying Russell, Antonelli third and Russell fifth. And guys, I mean, are you guys the same way about Antonelli right now? I mean, it's just really impressive.
No question about it. Yeah, I think. Mario, you're going to have an Italian in there in the mix for race wins and championships for a long time to come. But I do have a question. A big factor, it seems to me, in this week's competition or lapping in practice or whatever, is the evolution of the track. I can't recall a track. I mean, they all evolved to some degree in terms of grip, but particularly in qualifying for the sprint race, it was just extraordinary how much quicker the track seemed to get from the beginning to the end of a session. Did you and your engineers find it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. You touch a very good point, because we usually measure the grip and the roughness on Wednesday to have an idea on the, let's say, aging 1 year after 1 year, and the characteristics of the circuit. And we realized that the grip was lower than last year. So we were expecting quite a lot of track evolution during the weekend. Unfortunately, the rain that we had today is basically resetting the track, because you wash away the rubber that was on the track. But I am expecting again quite a lot of track evolution tomorrow, if it is dry, because there is chance of rain also for tomorrow. So nobody knows.
Well, on that, what is the percentage, Mario? Because I'm sure that's the question that everybody wants to answer. What's the percentage of more of the same? And it was a surprise today.
What I can tell you is that last time I was checking, the weather forecast for tomorrow is 40% chance of rain around 5 p.m. That means middle of the race. But this morning it was 20%, and we had a lot of rain. So
Yeah.
that's why I believe it's super difficult to make an accurate forecast here.
I think we've been lucky that this is the fourth race here, and we've not had rain before now, because it's Miami. There's tons of rain here. So, and I can't. We all know weather forecast. We could have no rain tomorrow. It could rain the whole race. We don't know. So,
we see. Usually, when you have rain, you have races that are more interesting. I would say that every time you have an element that is not under the control of the engineers, you have a better race. But
that is a good point. Well, we got to talk about qualifying today, because Bob, we started off and you were just amazed at Max's ability to just keep pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question about it. He is the unquestioned king of qualifying, and we've talked about how close the margins are, and yet somehow Max always seems to pull it back. I mean, after seeing him, take a great big handful of course correction there at turn 1, and then come around and still manage to go quicker than anybody else. Granted, it was close, and I'm sure over in the McLaren garage, they're beating themselves over the head
about the second driver's seat at Red Bull. Obviously, Lawson didn't get there. Yuki's getting up to speed. Perez is gone. But it's a lap like that where you see just how twitchy that car can get, and how on the edge and dancing over the edge at times Verstappen is. And that in itself tells you everything you know for the second driver, that it's almost impossible to drive like that all the time, but he can do it.
Yeah, in fairness, we should point out that Max did have a proper change to the underbody of the car. He had a new floor, which Yuki didn't have. But having said that, Yuki's problems in qualifying yesterday were all about being on the track at the wrong time, everybody trying to be the last man on track, and a couple of guys, Doohan was another one, who couldn't make it because either the team sent him out too late, or in Doohan's case, he wasn't able to get into the fast lane of the pits as quickly as he meant to, so that they had to pull him back, then send him on his way. And once again, the tolerances to get out there and begin a hot lap just as the checkered flag is coming out is a very, very calculation to get wrong.
Yeah. I got one more question for Mario.
Yeah.
Mario, I got to take your Pirelli hat off for a second and just talk Italian to me, because I covered motorcycle racing for a long, long time, as well as Formula One, and we really, especially in Formula One, have had very few superstar up-and-coming Italians over the years. I know we can point to Liuzzi and a few others, but to have a young Italian in a top team, what is the reaction at home to what this kid's doing? Is there a kind of a new following of Formula One in Italy?
I'm sure it's going to happen, but in Italy, everyone is for Ferrari, irrespective of the driver. They are all red, all Ferrari, and now having such a quick driver on a different team, but is an Italian driver from Bologna, the center of Italy, very well known. His dad is running a GT team, so everyone knows him in Italy. It's quite a strange situation where probably Italian fans are are trying to understand what is going to happen. They haven't realized yet that we have such a talented driver on track with the car that finally can give him the performance that is required. You mentioned Liuzzi, but we had Liuzzi, Trulli, the Giovinazzi, but they all didn't have the right machinery to try to get to the podium or to win races. Now, Kimi is in this position. I spoke to Toto many times about that. He is 100% convinced that it was the right choice, because don't forget that Kimi moved from Formula Regional to Formula 2, skipping Formula 3, and from Formula 2 to Formula 1 on a Mercedes car, not doing 1 year experience on a lower team, on a team from the midfield. He has the pressure. He is now in a top team. And obviously Mercedes is trying not to put any pressure on him. But it's normal to have pressure when you're racing for Mercedes. And despite that, he's doing, I mean, we are race 6 now, and we can say that the start of the season for him was impressive, both in qualifying and during races. So I'm very happy, and I believe that in Italy they will realize soon that we have finally a champion.
Yeah. Well, Mario Isola with Pirelli Motorsport, we thank you very much for coming on the show. Your insights are always incredible. It's great to have you, and of course we'll probably catch up with you in Austin as well.
Of course.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back after these messages. Much appreciated. Okay, we're on the YouTubes. Casey, do I need to do anything with the photo, or are you good? Do I need to do anything with the photo, or are you good? Okay. All right.
I don't like that background, John.
Yeah.
I don't like that one.
Well, no, that's not what people are seeing, Jonathan. Casey's putting up something else.
I'm sorry. My bad.
Yeah, no worries. All right, let's check on YouTube, see who's out there and what's happening. Okay.
I don't like that background, John. What's happening? Picture and sound seem good now.
Say again?
Yeah, what are we doing
All
here?
right, sorry, we're just checking on YouTube.
Don't do any secrets.
Well,
sorry, folks out there on YouTube, we really do know what we're doing, but this is.
I have the roar of the Porsche Cup in my ears right now, like big time.
No, we can't hear it, so it doesn't exist.
So, all right, well, yeah, you get.
And then he went away. Don't try this at home, kids. We are trained professionals.
Yes. Trained killers when it comes to broadcasting.
Yeah, this is going to be exciting stuff tomorrow, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the Jeopardy coming halfway through with the rain.
Yes. Yeah.
That is cool.
Interesting engineering meetings tonight.
I also thought it was interesting, and I'm sure our YouTube people would think the same, that Mario, is clearly trying to develop tires to do a two-stop. So there's been an initiative where we're like, hey, guys, we've got to spice the show up. We want you to develop softer tires so we can have more stops. That's the first time I've ever seen that as a rule of thumb.
All right, here we go. Coming back. Sorry, guys, I just figured out the YouTube chat. Oh, we got another 30 seconds. All the boys and girls are on YouTube. Andy P, Kevin Kelly, TW.
That's the lot, isn't it?
I'm struggling to see the rest of this.
Well, we'll carry on.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
Welcome back to Speed City F1. We are live, and I am in Miami, and Chris Medland is also in Miami with me, and he's out with his microphone right now. He's probably just finishing up with his F1 TV gig, and he's going to join us here shortly. But we were talking so much about Kimi Antonelli, which is absolutely worthy of discussion, but deserved. But this qualifying, they had some good stories in it. We had the other one that's actually really frightening to me is Hamilton. I was saying on the Wednesday show on Wheel to Wheel that I thought that Hamilton would be. I felt like he just needs to get his head right and get the muscle memory and all this going, but he's going in the wrong direction right now, guys.
Well, he's got a tough situation. We've talked about this before. He's in a new car, very strange car to him after all those years in race wins and championships in a very different Mercedes race car. So, it figures that it's going to take a while. He said coming in, I'm probably going to struggle in Miami. But boy, when you saw him this morning, when he slapped on those softs as the track dried out, and if there hadn't been that accident that cost us the last 4 or 5 laps of the race, I think Lewis might have passed his way all the way up to at least the McLarens, and he might have been second or even win the sprint race as he did back in China, simply because, he was just drums and guns on that tire in those conditions in that car.
Yeah, it's not often that we hear a Ferrari driver complimenting the strategy and sort of creating a master stroke for them. That really was dialed in structurally, shall I say. And yeah, we just got to dial in the human, and we know that at 7 world titles, he's capable and will get on top of it. But he is showing he is mortal after all. And I think if Verstappen were to jump in that Mercedes, I think it would be similar in terms of him wanting to move the car towards him.
Yeah,
that's interesting. You think he would struggle as well, huh?
Yeah, I do. I do genuinely think when you've been with a team as long, 4 titles for Verstappen, and Hamilton has been with, since Dot with Mercedes. I do think it does take some time because there are certain things that don't change. And when things do change, like a new floor, you can feel that, and you should feel that. So, yeah, there's a sense of, okay, they told me this was going to be like this, so I can adapt to it. And you could see that Verstappen, all right, he made a mistake at turn 1, but he was comfortable in that car. You can't sling a car around like that unless you're comfortable.
Yeah, and that car being built around him makes the job that much easier for him. I was reading, through some of the materials, and I can't remember if it was Carlos Sainz or Lewis Hamilton, and Sainz is very sympathetic to what Hamilton is trying to do, switching into that Ferrari. They said one of the biggest problems Hamilton is having is that he has to rely so much more on engine braking than he ever did driving the Mercedes. And that would take a lot of explanation, but basically it's another way to slow the car, may compromise the braking because they rely more on the friction in the engine and the driveline to slow the car down. It's all a 1,000 different reasons, and they all have to be mastered. And once again, I'll get on my soapbox. They don't get enough testing to iron out these wrinkles before they go out there and run for points. So,
Yeah, and can I add to that? One of the things I read was that Hamilton is, the last of the late breakers. He likes to brake much harder than Leclerc to bring the speed down. But you're right. If you can get, just as you can in your road car, if you can get to a point where you're using the engine to create the initial brakes, then you go heavy on the brakes. And so, we've all driven that way before, using the engine because you want to keep the revs up, because you don't want to, dull down the engine. You want to kind of keep it, the revs going. So engine braking gives you a real idea of where the revs are at that time. And of course, there's a lot of automation to it. But if that's the case, that Hamilton is a very heavy braker, heavier than Charles Leclerc, then that could be, like you say, that could be the combination that he's still trying to glitch out.
Yeah, I also want to talk about, I was just looking at the numbers for qualifying, because Russell in a Grand Prix, this is the first time Antonelli has out-qualified him, because Russell was 5-0 going into this race. Also, Bob, you mentioned Max, but I think you talked about his total number of poles, but I think this is his third pole. So he's had half the poles this year. And, all we hear is how the car is not easy to drive, not as fast as the McLarens, and he's still getting these pole positions. So there's another good pole story. But yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Well, one lap is very different from 50 or 60 laps in these cars. One lap, very low fuel. In fact, I was confused this morning watching the sprint race when they kept doing extra laps behind the safety car before they came to formation position. Unfortunately, they threw a red flag because those cars were fueled to go 19 laps plus a formation lap and have the required 1 liter of fuel still in the tank. But I can pretty much guarantee you that was the only fuel in the tank was that 1 liter. So when you start moseying around for an extra lap or two before officials let you go, then you start to have serious fuel concerns. So,
Jonathan Green, what do you think? Williams 6 and 7. What a fantastic qualifying.
Well, you cannot on round 6 say that this is a bit of the track suits them, Melissa. They've been to multiple different tracks,
that's right,
different speeds, race tracks, night tracks, and they've been competitive. They've had some bad luck. I mean, Sainz yesterday, Albon with a penalty from 4th. They've had some bad luck, but they are a competitive team. James Vowles really does deserve a big handshake next time we see him. He is walking the walk and talking the talk, and Williams are going back to their position as a contender.
Well, and I want to find it ironic that they had 3 of the most experienced drivers in the field, Alonso, Leclerc, and Sainz, all crashed out of this morning's sprint race.
Amazing. Yeah, what an up and down weekend for Ferrari so far, given that they had a podium at the sprint with Leclerc crashing out. So that couldn't, hero and zero. And now, Hamilton nowhere for the start of this one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I was going to say, Bob, looking at the times at the top of the time we talked about it with Mario, but incredible that between the top 3, especially 6,700ths between Verstappen, Norris, and Antonelli, and then Piastri right behind him. I mean, those top 4 are just incredible. But I mean, look, we haven't really talked about the McLarens yet, but Norris has looked great this weekend, hasn't he? I mean, and he needed it, didn't he, with losing the lead in the championship last week. Or last race.
Yeah, I think he's found his mojo. Look, he like I said, I like his style. He lives his heart on his sleeve, sometimes to his detriment. I do think he does beat himself up. He could do with some, nurturing there. But let's face it, this is, we've all done sports, but when you suddenly get into an arena that you've never been in and never competed in, and what I mean by that is, yes, he's been in Formula One for a time, but when suddenly the whole media in the world is expecting you to be world champion and expecting you to beat Verstappen, these are expectations he didn't have 2 years ago, and nor did McLaren. So this has come quick. And suddenly, it was this time last year that he suddenly realized he could win races, and he got a bit of luck last year. But now that's turned in over his season where those 2 drivers are the 2 men to beat.
Yeah. Hey, I'm just looking down the finishing and the qualifying today. And like you said, Leclerc, I mean, Ferrari not having a great weekend, Leclerc down in 8th. And Haas having got another couple of points, not a point, a good position here to get points tomorrow in 9th. And they got a point in the sprint race today. And or did Behrman's penalty take them out of the points?
Yeah, Behrman's he lost point. He lost his point.
Yeah. But Isaac Hadjar was leading up to this. Is Yuki Tsunoda in 10th and Isaac Hadjar 10th and 11th there. Look, the fact that Tsunoda's in the same zip code as Max, being the top 10, which hasn't been the case since Checo last year and, of course, Lawson at the beginning of the year. So that's impressive. And Isaac Hadjar, he was upset that he ended up P11, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he and Antonelli and Behrman are so impressive of the rookies that are around so far. So, yeah. Party on.
In person, by the way, speaking of impressive, I was walking into the paddock yesterday, and I found myself walking side by side with Ollie Behrman and Esteban Ocon and realized those guys are just about my height. Those are some tall F1 drivers, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're both like 6'1", 6'2".
You know,
the onboards of George Russell's car, that's why they had chopped the bottom off the steering wheel, because you could see his knees are right up under his fists when he's holding that steering wheel, maneuvering that car. It's really awkward looking.
And it also shows now we've got the bigger cars, maybe there is just more room, because I remember when Justin Wilson drove for Minardi, they said he was too tall. Gerhard Berger back in the 90s, we'll never fit you in the Benetton and all this sort of stuff. Tall drivers struggle, obviously. Even Jolyon Palmer, squeezed in there. It is and then the weight, which was a factor a few years ago because you had to meet a minimum weight. But I think this new era has allowed more tall drivers to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true. Just got a text from Chris. He's going to try to jump on with us for these last couple of minutes if he can. And I was looking at my notes. Did you guys see I think it was Piastri hit the curb and a fantastic slow-mo with all four wheels. The car was flying. It was pretty cool looking.
I think it was one of the Ferraris, wasn't it? I thought it was Leclerc, but I could be wrong. Yeah. And we noticed that row 2 for tomorrow's Grand Prix was row 1 with Antonelli and Piastri. And if you saw the start of that sprint race this morning, you know that no mercy will be asked or given going into turn 1, because Piastri really moved Antonelli aside to claim the inside line on that first turn and went on from there. It was it's going to be pretty exciting stuff tomorrow.
And who knows with the rain too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did understand one thing. If you remember, there was some strange calls to Yuki at the end of the race, telling him to sort of hold back because we finished under caution, right? And in the sprint race, that is. And it turns out that obviously they knew Verstappen was going to get the penalty for unsafe release. And so they were trying to make it so that he didn't lose too many places. So if Yuki could, do the maximum of 10 car lengths, you can't do any more than that. So they were trying to sort of get as much as they could out of it.
Boy, that was bizarre.
Wasn't it?
That release, when they released Verstappen right into the side of Antonelli's.
And actually, Antonelli did a hell of a job, because it could have ended up with him straight into the side of Verstappen and then knocking Verstappen into his own mechanics. Because
mechanics.
If he hadn't reacted the way he did,
there. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And yet,
that was
about increasing the pit lane speed limit for certain tracks coming up in the future. I'd have to think long and hard about that before I'd agree with it.
Did you guys notice the Stake Sauber car, because they're so far down in the pit lane where they're located, it looked like they're having trouble with the turning radius of the cars. Mm-hmm. I saw them manually having to back the car. I think that may have been both cars coming out at the same time, but still that shows you how tight that is down there. But we're just got a couple of minutes left on the show. And it looks like Chris may not make it, but of course he'll be with us tomorrow for both pre-show and post-show. But any final thoughts, guys? We got about a minute or so left.
You going to the Mercedes launch tonight? I mean, the Cadillac?
Cadillac?
Yes, I am going to go to the Cadillac launch.
What's happening, John? Tell the world.
I think that Cadillac is going to announce not their livery, but the team colors is what my understanding is tonight. And
red, white, and blue.
I don't know what else they're going to say tonight, but yeah, there you go. But I will be bringing a microphone just in case.
Good.
Excellent.
I'm really looking forward
guys?
to it tomorrow. It's that nice. Yeah, really nice.
Yep. Well, don't forget, we will have both of our pre-race show and our post-race and the BBC race in between. And our pre-race show tomorrow is going to start at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So because we got the race tomorrow at 4, so 3 o'clock Eastern, then the race, followed by our post-race show. And this has been Jon Massengale, Jonathan Green, and Bob Varsha, and we will talk to you tomorrow.